So a lot of things have been falling into place that are everything I've wanted and thought, but yet there's something going on here that I want to talk to you about. I want to show you this chart here. Let's see if you can see this. Desire. You'll notice that desire is towards the bottom of the chart, and these are emotional frequencies. The higher up, the higher the vibration, the more contribution you have to the positivity overall. And even though all these amazing things have been falling into place, I've been really, kind of negatively impacted by desire. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this. If you become conscious of this, the more that we become conscious of what we're feeling and why, the more we're empowered to respond, to react, to do something about it. So, grab my typical club soda I always bring on the walks with me here. I do my best to not talk about things I'm going to do or things I am doing unless they have relation to a point that we're making. I would much rather show something that I have done. I can talk about getting in good shape. I can show you the transition pictures from before to after. I can talk about starting a business from living in the back of a vehicle, creating self-belief, becoming somebody who can walk around and talk on this camera in public with his shirt off confidently. That is not where this started. So this thing that's happening, I've had a long-term mission and goal to own a piece of land out in the mountains that I can build a foundation for the rest of my life, for the message that we have, for an avenue to actually host gatherings for men who want to move forward, to progress, to find some momentum, to get from a place they're at to the next step, to get sober, to get fit, to create self-belief. This piece of land is definitely an integral part of that, although I could continue. This mission is something I will build with or without that land. But I've just accepted a counteroffer on a conservative piece of land. I went against desire to get the bigger, more expensive one because the discussion that we've just had about scarcity versus abundance, and recognizing that the scarcity mindset was buying the bigger piece of land because I'm worried that I can't succeed and do it on my own, so I would have to use debt, to be incapable of putting my time and energy into having these discussions, into building what we're building, because I would be too busy selling my time to somebody else to fund that, instead of keeping my time to build this, which will be able to fund things like that. But anyways, so you'll notice desire was pretty low on that frequency chart. And it's interesting to recognize where that feeling of desire is coming from, and how desire to me feels like it's the opposite of gratitude. Look at how much pretty much anybody has to be grateful for. First of all, just being able to walk, that was something I couldn't do for nearly 6 months. It took me a couple years until I could walk normal. Being able to see, I had, LASIK surgery was a college graduation gift. That's been over 20 years now. My vision is still above 20/20 in one eye and just slightly below in the other. Just being able to get up out of bed and walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night without hobbling around on crutches, or being able to see without having to put contacts in or glasses. Some of the most basic things. Having access to food, being healthy. But I look at all the things that I've done over the last 4 years, completely changing the direction of my life, getting myself healthy, getting myself sober, creating that self-belief, and finding my meaning, my purpose, a direction. Most of us go through life without true meaning or purpose. Just, we're going to survive. We want to try to own some stuff. We want to basically numb away an existence that is not what we're biologically programmed to live, by playing video games, filling our faces with unhealthy foods, drinking, vices, etc. So this piece of land I just bought, it was actually, I'm going to make a bunch of videos about this. I was out there a year ago. It was the piece of land that I wanted. It went off the market and it came back on the market. And it was this specific lot. It's like something was calling. Something was supposed to happen here. And at the same time, you know, I'm in this season of building. This is another transitional moment. My life has had a path with a lot of discomfort, and you know, this year being 100% self-employed, LLC income, I put a lot of the business's savings into investments. And you know, I'm going to be able to handle taxes, but there's a big purchase coming, which is inevitable, necessary by next spring, you know, 7 or 8 months from now. Next year, but anyway, well, so in about 4.5 months, 4 or 5 months, if I make this big purchase, then I'll very likely be able to save myself several $1,000s in taxes this year. And this is doing things exactly by the books, legally, ethically. And, you know, it's just a realization I've come to. You know, one of the great things about owning a small business is we're rewarded for investing into our businesses, into investing into the economy through our own businesses. And if I don't make this big expensive purchase by the end of the year, then I'm probably going to be paying, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 more in taxes, which to me, sadly, you know, I wish I felt like that money was going to a good use, but currently I'm kind of bummed about the amount of my life I have to give up to trade that time and energy to take away from my mission and my purpose, to then give that money away and have it just misused and abused and used against me. So, of course, this purchase is an interesting and exciting and creative one, and it will be cool and fun, and it'll be part of living, it'll be part of building the business. But man, then I find the perfect purchase. I get myself all excited about it. My credit's over 800. I've been pre-approved by the bank, but I've also spread myself pretty thin with investments. I've purchased a good chunk of Bitcoin over the last 6 months. Keep putting that money into an asset versus letting it just sit in the bank account and dwindle away. And if Bitcoin takes a dip, oh well, I'm stacking Bitcoin. I'm not looking at the amount of dollar value it has, because I know that the dollar will steadily trend down for the rest of my life. They'll keep printing money. They can't stop doing it. And the way the rich get richer is they hold assets. That's really everything in economics comes down. It's so complex, but the basic outcomes, if you understand this, you can position yourself better. And I hate that it took me until my early 40s to truly start understanding this, especially since I've understood what assets are. I've been stacking silver for 8 or 9 years now. Should have been closer to 20, or no, excuse me, should have been 12 or 13, but it's been 8 or 9 years. Everything's simplified. Money printing is the problem. The bankers make more money when we bail them out. The game is rigged because the people behind all the money are going to do dumb things that make a lot of profit for them, and we get to pay the price through money printing and inflation. And the way that we protect ourselves or benefit from that is that we own assets. Assets can be anything: gold, silver, stocks, crypto, real estate, something that will actually maintain value in trade for something else of value. The dollar amount doesn't matter. If you buy a piece of real estate for 100 grand 30 years ago and it's 400 grand today, but the dollar buys 4 times less what it would have, it's lost 75% of its value over that time, then you haven't actually made anything, but you haven't lost anything. And that's another part of this anxious anxiety. I feel that there's something going on right now. I mean, I know that the dollar is bleeding value. It's lost something like 30% of its buying power since 2020. It's 2025 right now. I mean, that's insane. How much of our lives are we giving up? Are we trading? Are we selling to somebody else instead of pursuing our mission, our purpose, doing something that we care about, or just enjoying ourselves? So, that's another reason I'm trying to get, if you do something, if I do actually make a purchase on debt, right now I can get 6% from the bank for my big purchase. And let's say the value of the dollar goes through the floor and it just tanks throughout the time I'm paying that debt down. Well, then I just bought that item for a whole lot cheaper by the end, and the bank is the one that ate it, and I mean, I'm not going to win as big as they do when we bail them out with our own tax dollars and money printing that hurts you and I before it touches them. But man, it's nice to win the game, even, it's nice to win even an inning of the big game. So this desire is so far outside of what I want to be as a person. I've chosen to live this life of very limited comforts on purpose. I haven't had a TV or watched TV in years. I was house sitting for my family. They've got a nice new place. They were out of town. And they've got these big fancy TVs and fancy entertainment centers. And in 5 days, I didn't turn one on once. I love living remotely out of my little SUV camper that I built up on mountaintops, out on the beach, on the ocean. And, it doesn't have running water. It doesn't have a toilet. And there have been times which I've set up the porta potty and I'm out under the stars looking out over the ocean. I'm like, this is pretty cool. But it's also uncomfortable and inconvenient. And that's where my heart feels pure and fulfilled, when I'm away from modern comforts and conveniences. Yet, this desire is for objects, for comfort, for convenience. And it just feels that it's such an opposite direction of all this amazing stuff that I have to be grateful for, including this piece of land that I did desire. And we've all got to have somewhere to plant some roots as part of a big design for my life, a big mission, a big puzzle that I'm solving. Everything, the way I think, everything is complex. I see all these different pieces of the puzzle and I connect the dots. I reverse engineer everything. Or, I heard this term. I was in the gifted creative program and in grade school through high school, and I am a whole to part learner. Most people are part to whole learners. Like, they get trained on this little thing and they get trained on that little thing, and then they kind of put together everything that way. Me, I need to understand the big picture and all of the different parts and how they fit together and understand the patterns, and then I start to plug them in and figure out the intricacies, so I understand fundamentally what's happening from the beginning to the end and everything in between, versus just knowing the little bits and pieces I need to do what it takes to follow directions and achieve a result for someone else. And I think, that's probably a characteristic that those of us with the real entrepreneurial drive, real creative drive, a lot of us probably share. And, that's the opposite of the militaristic style follow directions education system and job market that us as millennials and older are the most familiar with. And that's just not right for everybody, but some people also just need structure, need direction, need a curriculum, but some of us are quite the opposite. Says, I've made all this progress in life. I recognize at this moment I'm conscious that I'm battling this feeling of desire to solve a problem that doesn't need solved for a minimum of 4 to 5 months. And it's an exciting and happy and cool problem. It's going to be fun. When I solve this, it's going to be fun. But I look at opportunities to solve it today, and then I realize, man, that's going to financially hinder me so severely now versus actually saving up after, money involved with the purchase, after all these heavy investments I've done into Bitcoin lately. I've stacked some assets, quite a bit of assets for me, coming out of a place of divorce and then having an engine and transmission go out in the same year, and just trying to get back on my feet. But when I am able to tell myself, hey, this is wrong, even though you might have found the perfect solution to your problem, you found it too early, take a breath, blow off the desire. Hang on, this is going to get loud. Maybe we'll cut that out of the video. It's a much better feeling when I can recognize I have everything I need today. I have time to properly plan and prepare, to actually hire a tax professional to help me do this strategically, so that I have, find the perfect target, spend the least amount of money possible that gives me the most advantage for taxes, because I don't need a $50,000 write-off. I probably need about a $30,000 write-off. And there have been some tax rules that apply to that today, that weren't available recently. Actually, there's a cutoff right around, I think, over 31,000, where there's additional benefits beyond that for people who are making more than I'm making. But I've already, the amount of write-offs I have now, I need to get through the books. I've got a lot of things to clean up, and I don't want to make a purchase that's bigger than necessary unless it serves a purpose. But I don't want to make a purchase that's smaller than necessary, and I end up just paying a bunch of extra taxes while having a less useful investment asset. So this will all come together over the years. You'll see what I'm talking about, but we don't need to get into the details. The fact is, when I'm able to tell myself that this feeling of desire is low on the frequency chart, I'm trying to solve a problem I don't need to solve right now, freedom is my goal, freedom is the true desire. The more debt that I have, the less freedom I have. The freedom is used to pursue my mission and my purpose, to put my time, my energy, my creativity, my emotions into talking with you, into building something meaningful for the future, into helping other men find some of the things that I've found, to get sober, to get fit, to create self-belief. And it's a relief when I stop myself from feeling desire. When I recognize this is not the right thing right now. I take a breath, a sigh of relief. I recognize everything is going to be okay, no matter what. And so much could happen between now and the end of the year. Hang on. so much could happen between now and the end of the year. That's that scarcity mindset, is I have to act because I'm not going to make any more progress. But on a long timeline, the longer the timeline is, the more progress I've made. Most people don't make things happen anywhere as fast as they believe they're going to, but if you keep moving, you keep making things happen. And sometimes I forget to just look in the mirror and recognize what I've done with myself, with my health, with my physique, with my sobriety, with my business, with my content. I can't wait for you guys to see all of this amazing travel content of the year that I changed everything in my life. That I lived out of my SUV on a beach, most beautiful beach, probably on the West Coast, and on a mountaintop right above that beach, through a lot of really hard, uncomfortable, challenging times. And I did something that has a real inspirational story that can help people start to understand, think, to be entertained, to bring you along on this journey, to share this, because the things I've learned and I am learning and I'm figuring out, my whole message, every bit of it doesn't have to resonate with you, but there are bits and pieces of this that just every once in a while something might be truly meaningful and help you see a different perspective in life. That frequency chart I showed you, that came from he's really, my favorite tough love influencer. Now, I haven't listened to him as much lately. I think I've taken the fundamentals of his message. I've taken the parts that I like. There's plenty that doesn't resonate with me so much. And his name's Wes Watson. This guy was prisoner for 10 years, violent offense, violence and drugs, covered in tattoos on his head, tattoos on his throat, drives around in Bugattis, private jets, beautiful girls, everything. He came out of prison and built something amazing in just a couple years. And a lot of his message is so logical and so valuable, but there's still some parts of him, his approach, his personality that are also not congruent with me and my direction and my approach. And I hope that as we continue to develop this relationship, talk, to discuss, I share my journey, I share the things that I've proven to be true and I know to be true, and I share the challenges that I'm working through. I don't want you to say, hey, Mike G said this, Mike G did this is the way everything has to be. But I do hope that some of this you find some true value in, and you take the parts of it that are useful to you. And then you throw out the stuff that isn't congruent, but I hope you're also true with yourself. If you hear me talking about when I was a fat, pear-shaped, skinny, fat loser, well, if you don't like hearing me talk down about being fat, maybe it's time to look in the mirror and say, well, why would that bother me? And it's probably because your conscience is telling you need to take better care of yourself. And maybe you don't want to hear it, but I believe this wholeheartedly. Even for those who are already successful, they're going to be more successful when fitness becomes the highest priority in their life. And for those who are nowhere close to where they want to be, like where I started, and I'm nowhere close to where I want to be yet, but boy, have I made some real progress. And fitness is the foundation to everything. It gives you so much more than a physique. It teaches you the most valuable lessons: delayed gratification, discipline, consistency, fighting through discomfort, not running away from uncomfortable things, going into challenge instead of away from it. Whereas, everything else we're taught since we're young is somebody else is going to solve all the problems for you. All you got to do is follow directions. Everything will be smooth and comfortable and easy. And they've just been training us into reliance, compliance, dependency, and limiting self-beliefs and thoughts. So the more conscious that we become, the more capable we become. The more fit that we become, the stronger and more resilient that we become. I had to step into that gym and start learning these lessons through application. That's what gave me the strength to get sober, to quit drinking. all of that gave me the capability to take more and more unhealthy things out of my life, to eat better and better. Then it was about 3 years before I was like, man, I truly deeply believe in myself now, because I did hard, uncomfortable things over and over again. I didn't backstep. I didn't drink on the weekends. I didn't eat good most of the time, and then sometimes just go off the rails. I committed to a new way of life, to better habits, to consistency, to discipline, and to going head on into discomfort. And now I'm full of self-belief. I'm out walking and talking to you. On the days that we're not talking, I'm still out getting this hour-long walk in before work, before I do my contracting. And then at the end of the day, I'm either in the gym for an hour and a half to 2 hours and 15 minutes, or I'm out riding my bike, or I'm out doing another one of these long walks. So I get physical activity twice a day for a bare minimum of an hour each time. But most days are more like 3 hours combined, spread into 2 different bits and pieces. Now, those of you that have been along on the journey, you know, look, I'm making good money. I started this business. This is my client's, I started my business. This is actually my client's business here. And the home I was renting, it was my childhood home, recently sold. I could either go and get myself a nice, comfortable, cushy, fancy spot, or I could do something a little bit uncomfortable, stack a bunch of cash, invest more, build for the future, and continue to focus on self-development, business development, and believe in living beneath my means. So this is home. If you haven't seen that yet, I bought that from an auction in Washington, D.C. The back has been completely converted. It was in the presidential motorcade, not bulletproof. It wasn't the president's. And I gutted it and turned it into a camper. And there will be more videos about that, because this thing has been on mountaintops, on beaches, on sand dunes, with me living and working out of the back and starting a business. And, you know, if I were to just rely on other people and live comfortably for the rest of my life, well, I don't even think there would be 5 years left in playing that game. Not in summer of 2025. The way we know things to work doesn't work anymore, and it's ending quickly. So, which is better? Be wise, invest, save money, be uncomfortable, or just sit around and hope somebody else is going to, tell me what to do, pay me good enough money, and I'm going to be able to live a comfortable life for the rest of my life. That to me is one of the most uncomfortable things, because my conscience is screaming at me that I am wasting my life, that I could have a true impact, that I could build myself, that I could use the person that I'm building to have a real contribution to this world. Thanks for chatting with me today.